Hello and welcome to this special program where we are discussing mental health through the exchange of our personal testimonies. The information provided was obtained through our personal experiences, qualifications, and research. Please be advised to consult your healthcare professional before using any products or information provided on this program. Sose Stoykovic will be giving her testimony today. Welcome, Sose, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Tanya. Thank you very much for doing this with me.
We look forward to hearing your story. Let us open with a word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for giving us this opportunity to talk about mental health. Please guide our words as we cover the various issues associated with mental health and help us to convey possible solutions in accordance with your word. In Jesus' name, Amen.
Amen.
Sose, will you begin by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, definitely. I was born in Armenia in the small town of Vanadzor. I have a bachelor's degree in languages and teaching. After moving to Australia, I also studied to become a naturopathic counselor, a natural health advisor. I also studied to become a massage therapist and a facial therapist. I run my own clinic in Glendon, Australia, central Queensland, where we live, and there I offer organic facials, microdermabrasion, naturopathic counseling, etc. I was 3 years old when my parents got baptized, and I actually do remember their baptism. I remember that I was wrapped in a blanket, someone was holding me, and I do remember the event, how my parents got baptized. So I just want to thank you, Tanya, again for doing this program with me. This is the first time that I'm sharing my personal testimony, and especially a few things that I never share with the public usually. So I'm excited and I'm a bit nervous as well to be doing that. So I just want to say that because of our fallen nature, we are very far from what Adam and Eve used to be like when they were just created. So we read in Second Advent Review and Sabbath Herald. The Lord made man upright in the beginning. He was created with a perfectly balanced mind. The size and strength of the organs of the mind were perfectly developed. Adam was a perfect type of man. Every quality of mind was well proportioned, each having a distinctive office, and yet dependent one upon another for the full and proper use of any of them. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. So during your testimony, Tanya, you covered a lot of really good scientific information. So today I won't cover too much of that. I will just be talking about my own personal experience with mental health, the possible causes, and also what has helped me along the way. So doing these presentations and interviews with different doctors and counselors and psychologists, also having studied nutrition and naturopathy, I got to understand the mind body connection a lot better, and a lot of things made a lot more sense to me. While preparing my testimony, I was struggling with the same voice that often tells me, "You're not good enough. Why are you even doing this? You're not smart enough." And I do often pray for wisdom. I want to cling to the promises that God has given in the Bible, and that is James 1:5. The Bible says, "If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him." And when I want to claim this promise, I'm very aware of the gift of speech because I struggled with it, as I will explain more later. As I was struggling with this voice in my head, I also happened to read my daily devotional, and the verse that I found in my daily devotional was the following: Isaiah 50, verse 4 says, "The Lord God has given me the tongue of the learned, that I should know how to speak a word in season to him who is weary. He awakens me morning by morning. He awakens my ear to hear as the learned." I thought that's exactly right. It's not up to me. It's not all based on my knowledge what I will say. God will reveal to me what I need to say in due time. You know, when people talk about mental health, they talk about childhood traumas and how it all goes back to our childhood and they were events that maybe traumatized us. I personally remember my childhood very fondly, like a very warm dream, a very warm memory that I would like to go back to. I often have dreams about it. I loved the little house we lived in. I loved the school I used to go to. My mom was actually a teacher in that school, so then it felt like I was still at home when I went to school. So I was very carefree, and my parents usually had to deal with all the worrying and taking care of the house and everything. So when I was almost 2 years old, there was a massive earthquake that happened in a few towns actually in our region, and it was devastating. Our building was more or less okay, enough for us to get out of the building. I don't have any memories of the earthquake, but my parents obviously were traumatized by it. And my memories go quite far back into when, after the earthquake, we went to Georgia because we didn't have anywhere to stay, and we would go to a canteen to eat. Then we would get out and feed the pigs. So I remember that feeding the pigs with my dad. And my parents are surprised at how I can even remember that. So after the earthquake, my parents and a lot of other people had to sleep outside, and it was cold. It was December, 7th of December 1988. A lot of people had to sleep outside, so I developed a pretty bad case of chest infection. And up until I was 7 years old, it would come back to me. And as soon as I started crying, I would start coughing. And then, it would make me feel really sick. So after the earthquake, also in 1991, Armenia got its independence, after which I just already remember very vaguely the bread lines and rations and poverty all around. We didn't have electricity, and for me, it was kind of romantic. It was nice, but for my parents, it was very difficult because they had to live without basic needs. I was also miraculously saved a few times in my life, especially when I was a child. Accidents happened in my life to me where I should have died, but I didn't. So I like to believe that God had a plan for me. So, because of the harsh circumstances my parents had to deal with, and because of their own upbringing, because of the way they decided to deal with certain situations, affected us as kids as well growing up. As a child, I was quite extroverted, even awkwardly extroverted, I believe. There were instances where I would be lost and my mom wouldn't know where I was. She would go to different neighbors' houses looking for me, and finally, she would find me in one of the neighbors' houses. So she said that she got to know all the neighbors thanks to me. So when I was 11, I remember very well that my teacher had organized an end of year presentation, and we had like little poems that we had to recite or a few sentences we had to say at the end of the presentation. And I was an angel. I was dressed in white and I had a few sentences to say. And I can just remember when I got up to say my part, in my head, I thought, what if I can't get the words out of my mouth? What if I can't talk? And as I started speaking, I got to the very last sentence and I just couldn't talk. The words wouldn't come out of my mouth and I got all teary. My teacher finished the sentence for me and I went back to the line. So then that's my first memory of when I just thought I'm not going to be able to speak. And so it's very embarrassing also because it's not your typical stuttering. The way it affected me was I just couldn't say the words. I didn't repeat the first letter a few times, but the word just wouldn't come out of my mouth. So then it would be confused with not knowing the lesson or not knowing what to say, because people that stutter don't necessarily make eye contact, they look away. They start playing with their hands and fingers. So it affected my confidence as well quite a bit, because my mum was upset. She was saying, "What happened to you? You were not born this way. You were a very fast talker, and you used to say little rhymes and poems before you were even 2 years old." And yeah, I don't remember any speech problems until I was 11. An interesting thing to mention as well is that when I sang, I didn't stutter. So I did really enjoy singing, because when I did sing, I was free. I also liked to draw, and that's how I expressed my feelings. And Tanya, I know that you draw as well. So I think we have that in common as well. So I could look at the picture later and I could recall my memories when I was drawing. For a very long time, I didn't understand why I stuttered. I didn't have answers. But now looking back, I know that the same things that made me stutter are the same things that also make me self conscious. I put too much pressure on myself, especially on simple tasks. I might overthink. I might feel this pressure that I have to make people happy. I am concerned about what I said was right or not. So now it's making more sense to me. Even as I was preparing my testimony, God opened my mind and reminded me of the things that made me stutter. And having struggled with this stuttering issue, and I believe because of a big chunk of my childhood and teenage life was dedicated to just trying to speak without stuttering, I think public speaking has been a bit challenging for me. And in my life, I guess, stage by stage, I got better and better at combining speaking with eye contact and smiling, something that comes very naturally to people. When I was 14, we were given an apartment. The government gave everyone who had lost their house in the earthquake an apartment. We were told that we had to demolish the houses we lived in, otherwise, we wouldn't get those apartments. So then we believed them and my parents demolished the house where we were living, and we had to move to this new apartment. I still remember how they were pulling up these wooden floorboards, and I remember thinking to myself, do they really have to do this? And I can't remember if I asked my parents about it or it was just in my head, but I was just thinking, do they really have to do this? Do they really have to demolish the house? Can't we just keep it? And until just recently, I kept having dreams about my childhood home, about my neighborhood, because I believe I was very abruptly plucked out of my childhood. I didn't really make that decision. I was very traumatized. So, an experience like this could have been very normal for another child, but for me, it was very traumatizing. So I had to go to a new school. I had to completely change my environment. It became very difficult to make friends. I was in a school that the teachers didn't know me like they did in my previous school where my mom was working. So I was also a Sabbath keeping Christian, and the teachers were not very happy about that, because we had lessons on Sabbath that I was not attending. So a couple of my teachers made it quite clear that they were not happy about that. And interesting thing is that I'm not traumatized by it because I don't remember it. I had another girl that used to come to church with me in the same class with me. So she reminds me of how they would make life a bit difficult for us, but I don't remember any of that. At this stage, when I was 14 and I changed school, I remember my stuttering got worse. At this stage, already it used to display itself when I was talking to other people, when I was answering my lesson. And it would come and go, of course, but it was really bad and it was embarrassing. And I just remember praying about it and remembering how Moses said to God, "O my Lord, I'm not eloquent, neither before nor since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue." I got down on my knees very often and I prayed that God will give me back my speech. I didn't know the answers. I didn't know why it happened to me, but I was pretty sure it's going to be one of the most difficult things that God has done for anyone, one of the most difficult, perhaps, or challenging health issues that God had to reverse. When I was about 15, 16 years old, I remember that I didn't feel so special anymore because in my previous school, the teachers treated me like I'm pretty special and I'm smart. At this stage, I didn't feel very special anymore. Also, I think because I was getting quite non-constructive criticism from some family members about my appearance, about obviously my speech, which, was not good. And that affected my confidence as well. At the age of 16, I started studying for my university exams, and I was stressed, I was exhausted. I would wake up 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning to study for my exams. And that's when I remember that I developed selective sound sensitivity. It first started off with just my mum banging the door, maybe, or closing the door a little bit hard, and I would react to it, especially if it was early morning and I wanted to sleep longer. And then it got worse, where I would react to my mum's. At this stage, it was just limited to my mum, so I would react to her mouth noises, and if she was sniffing and all of those very normal noises that people make, I would get very agitated, very angry. And this was confused with intolerance. My mom thought that I'm retaliating for something else. I don't love her anymore, and that didn't help. While I was studying for my uni exam, I also remember that when I would wake up at night to study, I would put quite depressive rock music on. And so I would study under this rock music. And I used to listen to this when I was 16, 17, about a couple of years. And I started wearing bandanas and wearing like dark eye makeup and started acting like I just didn't care about anything. I even remember going to church like that. So I think that was a cry for help. And if it was addressed correctly, I believe even my sound sensitivity, maybe it could have gone away. I'm not sure. Up to this day, I can't handle certain food combinations at the same time in my mouth. They taste very different to me and I can't handle it. I can't handle different textures still. Around this time, I started thinking about suicide. I don't ever recall planning or thinking that I'm going to do it, but I just remember thinking how easy it would have been if I just didn't exist. And one day I actually spoke with my father about it. I said, I actually found out what the easiest way is to stop existing. And my dad got very upset. That must have been horrible for a parent to hear that their child is thinking about it. But then I also don't remember that he asked me any more questions after that, or checked if I was okay or I was still thinking about it. So I guess that could be scary, but I think it would be good if someone is talking about that to check on them later, especially when your brain is still developing and not fully formed. It could be pretty dangerous. So the first year of my entrance exams, I did well in the written exams, but the oral exam, where I had to talk, I failed in that, and that was because of my stuttering, because I paused again. The lecturers corrected me on one thing, and then that was it. I just lost my confidence, and I started pausing and freezing. And I just remember one of the lecturers turning to the other one and saying, "She's so dumb." And I guess because English is a second language for me, they probably wouldn't think that I would understand, since I gave off that impression that I can't even talk, so I must be dumb. And I still, I still remember that. So the second year I did fine, because I worked on my language skills more, and I worked on my stuttering. And the way I did it, I actually started recording myself. So the second year I applied, I actually got pretty good marks. Even in my oral exam, I did quite well. And at this stage, my stuttering was not so bad. I could control it. And like I mentioned, I had different techniques. I would read the Bible aloud as well. And I kind of made an agreement with God. And I said, "God, please help me to not stutter and speak well. When I read the Bible and I'm a good Christian, let me not stutter. But when I stop reading the Bible, let that come back to me." So when I entered uni, I was quite depressed. All of a sudden, again, I was removed from my surroundings. It was a completely different city. I had depression, and that's the first time I actually recall having pretty serious depression, apart from the time when I was 14 and we had to move from our house, our initial house, to the apartment. At the time, I didn't know that is depression, but at the age of 18 already, I thought, man, I'm really depressed. And also living with family members didn't help. Again, I was criticized, and some interesting comments about my appearance. I was told that I shouldn't even bother wearing makeup because it doesn't even make a difference, that I'm dark. Comments were made about my eyes and my nose, how I have frog eyes. And when you're still, I guess, emotionally developing as a young adult, those things do really affect you. So when I started studying, obviously with my depression as well, I started getting these intrusive thoughts about what I look like when I walked, about how I closed my mouth, how my eyes looked. And at one stage, I seriously thought that I limped and everyone could tell. So when I started swimming at the age of 19 in the second year of my uni studies, that's when my depression got better significantly. So I do realize now that exercise and swimming especially does help with depression. And I was out of the house a lot more, so my lifestyle changed as well. I had more friends, and that improved. My stuttering improved as well, but my self-confidence was deteriorating at that stage already. Also, I think because I didn't have the same things that my group mates had, whether that be phone or nice clothes. Like, I didn't have those same luxuries that they had, I suppose. So that, I believe, affected my confidence as well. I just want to mention as well that I never questioned my faith. I never thought that maybe I'm in the wrong denomination. But I do remember that I didn't practice my faith and my belief as well. And before meeting my husband, I didn't date Christian guys or Adventist guys. During those years of studying in uni and staying with family members, I also felt like people were avoiding us. So by the time I started working, I had already developed some serious self-esteem issues. I would like to mention as well that the last a year and a half of my uni, we stayed in the church because they let us stay there, and that was nice. While living in church, also certain things happened that affected my confidence, also because I couldn't really invite my friends with confidence to my house. It was the church that we were living in. So I'll just talk a little bit about when I started working. I purposefully put myself in situations where I had to talk, when I had to socialize with people. So I would apply for jobs that meant that I would have to be at the front desk, greeting people, talking with people. So my stuttering at this stage was hardly noticeable. It was only if I got really upset or really nervous, and that was like hardly ever. So I was really grateful about that. When I was working in that TV marketing company, I was treated quite poorly by the management, and I was not the only person that was treated like that. And as a single girl, as someone who is working to provide for herself and for the family as well, it was very disheartening. It made me question myself again, that if I applied for another job, who's to say that I'm not going to be fired? So I worked there for 2 years. And we were being told actually quite often that we should be so grateful that we have this job and no one else pays as much as them. And then you were made to believe that, yes, I would even say you were groomed to believe that you must be very fortunate to be working for them. I was fined for mistakes, and money was taken away from me because I made mistakes on the job. And the next job I applied for, somehow my manager decided to, on the phone, tell them that I didn't leave, they fired me. And I don't know what else they told me, but I didn't end up getting the job that I applied for. So it seemed like my manager made an effort to make our lives miserable. Before I got married in 2012 and moved overseas, I don't remember getting upset with people. I don't remember resenting people or holding grudges. They were incidences when now I remember, and I think that was horrible. I'm surprised that I didn't get upset from it. And I didn't. I would even tell my mom to ignore things or ignore people. So after moving to Australia, certain symptoms escalated, especially my sound sensitivity. I was depressed again. All of a sudden, I had another bout of depression. I had chest pains because of it, to a point where I thought something is seriously wrong with me. All of a sudden, I had more time to think about things, and I started resenting people for what they have done to me, for the words that they said to me, for how they treated me. All of a sudden, all the past hurt came back to me, and I started thinking, should I confront them about it? Should I not? So I was struggling with that. I would remember those events as if they happened yesterday. I remember I went to the doctor because I had chest pains, and she just told me after they did echocardiogram, she said, nothing's wrong with your heart. It's just that you have to change your environment, you have to have friends and all of that. And that's easy to say when I had just moved to the country. I also had a certain health issue that I had surgery for, and that was still healing. When I moved to Australia, me and my husband met this naturopath. She was studying to be a naturopath, actually, and she told me about the vegan lifestyle. And my parents have always been health conscious. We've been vegan and then non-vegan, but she told me about the plant-based lifestyle. And the more I socialized with her, the more I learned about it, the more excited I got. Before that, I didn't even know what organic meant. I remember asking my husband and saying, what's organic, when we went to the supermarket, and he said, oh, it's just the same thing as the non-organic, but a bit more expensive. So I didn't know much about really what nutrition can do to you. And my doctor had said, you can eat anything, just avoid sour and spicy. And that's what I was doing, and it wasn't working. And then we went on a plant based lifestyle with lots of juicing. I did lots of juicing, and my condition got better. And while I would have liked to share that with people, family members especially were quite critical, like mocking critical, that they would mock our lifestyle, and certain people were concerned about what we were doing because all of a sudden we lost a lot of weight. So that did not help either, because I didn't feel welcome. The whole socializing part fell on my husband's shoulders, because I did not have many friends. I wasn't working initially when I moved into Australia, of course. Looking back now, I understand how overwhelming that can be for a man when they have to be your friend and your husband, and you've just moved from a country where you had friends and family to no friends and family. So we stayed in a main city for a couple of months when we got married, and I moved to Australia, after which we moved to a mining town where 95% of the people were locals. And you could tell that I have an accent, obviously. I had that European accent that would stand out, especially in a place where there were not many Europeans. And I did have some discrimination towards me. When I did work experience, I remember that I didn't get the job when it became available, and my manager actually literally told me that's because of your English, because people can't understand you. And at that time I didn't want to say anything or fight back, because I thought I need his referral. After that, I had another incident with a taxi driver who was quite upset, and she told me, she said, "We have rules here, you know," because at the time that I ordered the taxi for, she had come a little bit earlier, and then she got upset and left because I didn't open the door in time, apparently. So she was upset, and that's what she said to me. So that affected me quite a bit as well. Me and my husband, when we would go to church, I was happy to go to church, but then I was quite uncomfortable talking with people, and I think people could tell that as well, because I thought everyone can tell that I have an accent. I was trying to make eye contact as I spoke and smile as well, and it was difficult for me, for someone who had had stuttering issues, and also English was a second language for me. I even got attacked one time online by someone who said, "You go past me and you won't even say hi to me." It was a comment, it was a public comment that everyone could see. So I didn't feel the need to fight back, because I knew that I'm not very sociable. I guess I have a social anxiety, perhaps at that time, even more. As the time went on, I worked on myself, and I prayed as well a lot for wisdom, and things got better. Even some church members commented later that I have changed quite a bit since I first moved to Australia. As our diets improved, we also started making different religious decisions. We started watching different programs. A lot of things were eliminated from our lives. And obviously, we could see that the attacks took a different shape. As the time went on, I could feel that I am pretty sensitive about criticism or people's behavior towards my choices, if they disapproved my choices. I would also struggle with catastrophizing, like if my husband called me later than he was supposed to, or I called him and he didn't answer, he didn't call me back for a while, I would start thinking of all the possible bad things that could have happened to him before he could call me, and I would just calm down. Before having kids, I had a lot of my symptoms under control. And when I had kids, I suffered with postnatal depression with both of them. With my first child, I had a very happy pregnancy. And the first 2 weeks after she was born, I was very happy. And I thought, postnatal depression, this can't affect me. Also, I didn't have much information about it. I hadn't been spoken to about it. I hadn't been warned that this can happen and this is what you do when it happens. So I didn't reach out for help because I felt embarrassed. My mom was with us helping me, and my husband was helping a lot as well. So I thought, um, how can I not appreciate their help? I just felt ungrateful, especially because the people I spoke with about it, they spoke about motherhood as this wonderful, amazing thing that you're just beaming and you're just so happy to just be able to hold your child in your arms. And I didn't feel that way. So then I felt I'm just probably not able to appreciate the gifts that God has given me. A healthy child, my mom is helping me, my husband is helping me. Anxiety also went along with depression. I got quite anxious as my first child grew. I would go to bed and have these thoughts like, what if this happens to her? What if we go out for a walk together and this and that happens to us? What am I going to do? And slowly I could feel that I go to bed tired, and I'm not tired anymore since I have all these thoughts about all the what ifs. You know what they say, trouble is greater in anticipation than in reality. I also had sense of guilt because I usually put a lot of pressure on myself, and I am a perfectionist as well. I had a sense of guilt if I felt like I didn't spend enough time with my child and I don't spend enough time with my husband. If my children get hurt, I still have that. I will feel guilty and think, what else could I have done to have prevented this? There is a saying, it says, where faith begins, anxiety ends. Where anxiety begins, faith ends. And I guess my faith was not greater than my anxiety, and that's the issue with anxiety as well. I believe if we had bigger faith, then we wouldn't be so anxious. With the second child, I already kind of knew what to expect. I was thinking it probably will hit me again, and lo and behold, I had postnatal depression again. Actually, one day before my son was born, I already started feeling anxious and depressed. I believe also because it was during COVID where my parents were supposed to be here, and it just hit me that they're not going to be here with me helping and supporting, and my husband was going to go back to work pretty soon after the birth. So this time I actually reached out for help. I had counseling. I saw a psychologist. I saw my midwife a few times to just have a chat and tell her about my symptoms, to just have someone to talk to. I also made a few appointments with the GP, and I happened to have a really good counselor, a really good GP and a midwife who would talk to me, and that was actually the only diagnosis that I ever received for my mental health struggles, and that was postnatal depression. And again, I struggled with the sense of guilt because I have to divide myself into three parts. I have to be there for my husband, I have to be there for my kids. My first one was almost 3.5 when the second one was born, so they were in different stages of development. I wanted to help the first one, but I also wanted to be there for my second one, and I wanted to be able to cook healthy meals and be there for my husband, and it was just wearing me down quite a bit. I do actually apologize to my kids if I am impatient, and this is not about disciplining them or correcting them. This is when I'm being impatient, when I could have been patient with them. And I believe that that is okay to do that. I explained to them why I got upset with them, and I'm sorry if I was a little bit too loud or a little bit impatient. I'll talk a little bit more about how I overcame a lot of my mental health struggles and what has helped me. But these are the daily struggles that I go through, that I have to always go back and try to correct and then keep going. And sometimes they come back, and then I have to lean on God's promises again, try to recall what I've learned. So we can't expect that our struggles will be completely gone one day. Sometimes we do have to go back and reclaim those promises, or try to think, what did I learn, what did the counselor say, what did that article say, or what does that doctor say about mental health. These are the daily struggles that I go through. I do worry quite a lot about what I should say, what I shouldn't say, if people like me or not, if they liked what I said or not. Did I say this word correctly? Would I upset someone with what I said? I do struggle, obviously, with the need to be accepted, to be validated, and I go off people's approval. I am affected by people's attitude, I guess, the way they treat me. If they are happy, then I guess I'm happy as well. But if they are upset, or if I can see they don't like me, I kind of shrink as well from there. So I have come a long way, but I obviously still have to work on those things. I do still struggle with my low self esteem. Again, I have changed quite a lot as I realized that I'm precious in God's sight. I'm one of His children. I do have sometimes excessive sense of guilt. I may remember, years ago what I've done, even when I was younger, what I did to my brother, and I may feel the need to call him and say, hey, I remember this and I'm really sorry for that. I struggle with perfectionism. I do try to make sure that everything is perfect, otherwise, it's not good enough. And sometimes that adds to the tension, because believe it or not, people don't focus on your mistakes as much as you do. I like to control constantly what I say and my facial expressions, how I walk, how I sit. So I am quite self aware to an excess, I believe. So obviously the perfectionism, which I was told by my counselor that it is also a sign of low self-esteem, that you try to overachieve so that you feel good about yourself. I remember two instances in my life when my perfectionism got the better of me. The first time was when I didn't enter the university that I wanted to go to, and I went to a different uni, which was not public, it was private, and I started doing really well. And I thought, no, I'm already getting A's, and I'm not like working too hard for my marks, so then it's not good. And then I got physically sick from the thought that my friends are in uni already and I'm not. And the second time I got very sick was when I was a student and I wanted to earn a bit of extra cash. I went and got some training to work as a waitress, and the very thought that I'm going to be working as a waitress, what are my friends going to think about me? And see, this is a mentality that was quite prevalent in my time when I was like 18, 19. And I wish that I didn't have that mindset, but that's just a cultural thing, as well as just my mindset that if I don't work the job that I have in my mind, then I'm just not good enough. And again, I want to mention, this is nothing against a particular job. That's just what was in my head. So now I just want to go through my victories, which are not really my victories, because I believe that God was really kind to me, and I do want to use the gifts that I have to glorify Him. So whenever I have a triggering thought about a past hurt or someone said something that hurt me, I can now stop myself very quickly, and it doesn't get to that chest pain stage, whereas before I would just keep going over that incident and think, what should I have said that I didn't say? Oh, I should have said this, I should have said that. And now I can actually stop myself before I have physical symptoms. So after studying myself and interviewing different doctors and professionals in the field, I learned that just because you are predisposed, just because a family member had certain conditions, it doesn't mean that you have to have them as well. The brain is pliable, it is flexible, and it can be changed. I have been able to overcome my fear of talking in silence. And if you have been a stutterer or know someone who struggles with it, you know that when there is someone speaking at the same time, you don't struggle as much. But once you have to talk in silence, then that's when, you struggle. And I believe I'm still prone to that. If I get very upset, then I can still freeze. It does affect my speech, my mental and emotional state, but the thing is that people can't tell anymore. I have managed to turn my previous worries and anxieties into excitement. I get anxious, yes, before my presentations and before interviews, but then I have this big sense of excitement as well, and the adrenaline actually works in my favor. I'm able to socialize a lot better, to make eye contact, to smile as I talk, whereas before I believe I would make people uncomfortable when I started speaking. I honestly have forgiven a lot of people that have hurt me in the past, also because now I genuinely believe that people sometimes don't even remember the hurtful things that they said to you. They might even be surprised if you bring it up again and say, you said this to me and that really hurt me. So I like to give people the benefit of the doubt as well, because they really genuinely sometimes don't even remember what they said. As I said, I had counseling when I had my second child, and it helped me a lot, especially with my anxiety, but the depression as well. The first 4 months of my second child's life, I had counseling. When I have an intrusive thought that bothers me at night, I like to just give myself a time and say, okay, I'll worry about this tomorrow, this and this time. And you just give yourself the permission to go to sleep, and it does actually really work. Obviously, you're not going to think tomorrow comes, you're not going to say, oh, it's 1 o'clock already, I was supposed to worry about that. So it does really help when you give yourself the permission to not worry about things. I'm more comfortable now with rejection because I believe that God is in control. A lot of the times when people are not nice to you or you think they are rejecting you, they don't reject you, they just reject the message you are trying to convey. They are rejecting what you stand for. So I'm more comfortable with that because it's more important what God thinks of me, what God thinks of the words that I say and the messages I share. Being in ministry as well, in health ministry, has helped me a lot because that's when I focus on others and not on myself. And there is actually science in helping others and not focusing on yourself, because people that help are happier than the ones that are helped. What has helped me as well when I get anxious about talking to someone that, let's say, is more well known or famous, when I feel inferior, I just try to remind myself that for God, I'm the same as that person. And in Proverbs 22 verse 2, we read, the rich and the poor have this in common: the Lord is the maker of them all. I can be too harsh to myself sometimes, and I still struggle with those thoughts that I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy. But then I cling to Jesus again and claim His promises, and they do really help. Ellen White writes, she says, when Satan tells you that you are a sinner and points out this neglect and that wrong, tell him you know you are a sinner, but that Jesus Christ came into the world to save sinners. Tell him, if any man sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous. Repeat the promise. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. It says also in the song, in the hymn Rock of Ages, in my hand no price I bring, simply to thy cross I cling. I have come to appreciate my struggles as well, and I just realized that they make me keep pushing and keep striving for perfection. We may not get to that perfect state, but my dad used to say, if you aim for the sky, you will get to the roof. So at least if we aim for the sky, we will get to the roof. We will get further than we would have if we didn't try. So I have identified the issues I have. They have names now. I'm not ashamed of calling them by their names. They can be anger, resentment, excessive guilt, and remorse. I have also come to realize that I can't fix these things by myself, that I need Jesus, and the rest is work in progress. 2 Corinthians 12:7 says, and lest I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of the revelations, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I be exalted above measure. And verse 8 continues on to say, concerning this thing I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it might depart from me. And he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, most gladly I will rather boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in needs, in persecutions, in distresses, for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. I have also learned to make fun of my mistakes, and I have learned to tell people when I'm nervous to actually tell them and say, I'm really nervous. And it somehow takes the pressure off me, because then I feel like they don't expect me to be perfect and I can afford to be nervous. I've also learned to focus on the message, not myself. And when the message becomes more important than yourself, you don't seem to be as anxious. I think that if there is a message that you have to share that God has given you, if you are doing God's work, then you should not be anxious, because if need be, God will give you the words to speak. As someone who is not a natural public speaker, I do daily struggle with it. But if that means I have to go over the video again and watch myself talk on camera and get used to how I talk and how I look, let that be it. I used to get very upset and very offended when people disapproved of my opinion or they were offensive towards me. But now I just actually, when I'm upset, I kneel down and pray. And I just acknowledge that Satan wants to distract and discourage me. And I'm not going to dedicate my time and my mental and emotional energy to him. I have also realized that when I'm ready to give up everything, when I have nothing more to lose, that's when God will help me. And I just remember that for almost 3 years, I couldn't see my family during the COVID restrictions, and I wasn't sure if I will ever see them again. And I came to a point in my life where I was okay with it. I even prayed and said, God, it's okay. At least if I can see my family in heaven, I would be happy with that. I'm happy with the fact that I'm content. I'm not happy, obviously. I'm content with the fact that I may never see them again, because you don't know the way things were going, how, tomorrow would be. And when I was okay with it, when I was at peace with it, that's when we were able to travel again. I'm also learning to live in the present, because when we live in the past, then we are carrying the past baggage, the past hurt, which can give us depression. When we're living in the future, that can make us anxious and we have that what if attitude. But when we are living in the present, that's when we can make decisions and do something about the concerns that we have. I just want to read a few quotes as well concerning building character and how there is hope for everyone that wants to have the mind of Christ. Satan assailed Christ with his fiercest and most subtle temptations, but he was repulsed in every conflict. Those battles were fought in our behalf. Those victories make it possible for us to conquer. Christ will give strength to all who seek it. No man without his own consent can be overcome by Satan. The tempter has no power to control the will or to force the soul to sin. He may distress, but he cannot contaminate. He can cause agony, but not defilement. The fact that Christ has conquered should inspire his followers with courage to fight manfully the battle against sin and Satan. And that is also the reason not to judge anyone. And the Bible tells us not to judge, lest we be judged as well. Because we never know what the person is going through. When they looked at us funny or they did something that we didn't appreciate, it could be a result of a deeper issue. Ellen White also says, character does not come by chance. It is not determined by one outburst of temper, one step in the wrong direction. It is the repetition of the act that causes it to become habit and molds the character either for good or for evil. Right characters can be formed only by persevering, untiring effort, by improving every entrusted talent and capability to the glory of God. Instead of doing this, many allow themselves to drift wherever impulse or circumstances may carry them. This is not because they are lacking in good material, but because they do not realize that in their youth God wants them to do their very best. If the youth today would stand as Daniel stood, they must put to the stretch every spiritual nerve and muscle. The Lord does not desire that they shall remain novices. He wishes them to reach the highest point of excellence. He desires them to reach the very highest round of the ladder, that they may step from it into the kingdom of God. As we can see from the quotes, the character can be formed, can be developed and perfected by putting to stretch every spiritual nerve and muscle, especially while we are still young. In closing, I would like to say, don't be ashamed to seek counseling or to see a psychologist. They do work, and even if the therapy itself doesn't work, it's actually someone that is paid to listen to you. So it's their job to listen to you, and it will really help to just have a chat with someone. I'd like to remind everyone to spend more time with their family and kids, because there is no such a thing as spending too much time. We will never regret spending a lot of time with our kids or with our family. It's usually the opposite that makes us depressed and regretful. Helping others, spending time with others, and focusing on other people takes the mind away from us and does really help. Exercise gratitude as well. There is science in that. John 16, verse 33 says, "These things I have spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world." No temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to men. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make the way of escape, that you may be able to bear it. We are to grow daily in spiritual loveliness. We shall fail often in our efforts to copy the divine pattern. We shall often have to bow down to weep at the feet of Jesus because of our shortcomings and mistakes. But we are not to be discouraged. We are to pray more fervently, believe more fully, and try again with more steadfastness to grow into the likeness of our Lord. As we distrust our own power, we shall trust the power of our Redeemer and render praise to God, who is the health of our countenance and our God. By beholding, we are to become changed. And as we meditate upon the perfections of the divine model, we shall desire to become wholly transformed and renewed in the image of his purity. It is by faith in the Son of God that transformation takes place in the character, and the child of wrath becomes the child of God. We may not be afflicted in the same way as others, but once we accept our problems, once we accept that we actually do have issues, we can cling to Jesus, cling to those promises, and then He can help us. There was an instance when I saw a naturopath for a health issue that I had, and when I spoke with him about the health issue, I also mentioned to him that I have stresses in my life, I have anxiety, and I mentioned to him that this person that I had lost so suddenly to a disease, I see him in my dreams. And he said, yes, your loved ones can actually visit you in your dreams and pass on messages. And thankfully, I didn't believe that. But someone that is in that vulnerable stage where they have lost a loved one, they can believe that, because we don't want to believe that we will not have contact with that person anymore. It would help if we just ask ourselves that question: would God approve of this technique, whatever the professional is using? Pray when you are anxious. My advice when we are anxious is that we need to pray when we are anxious. I have realized that you can't pray and be anxious at the same time. We also read in Proverbs, trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. In due time, like I mentioned, God will give us the wisdom and the right words to speak. Let us keep ourselves in a cheerful frame of mind. It is our privilege, through faith, to have the mind of Christ. And then we should also remember the attitude that Job had. We read in 1st Job 20, then Job arose, tore his robe, and shaved his head, and he fell to the ground and worshipped. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. So we can also try to exercise to have this attitude and not to think that we lost things that belonged to us, because Job lost his house, his children, everything he had, and his health as well. Yet he didn't seem to have that attitude that it was his things that he lost. We should have the attitude of how good it is that we got to have these things for this amount of time. It also helps to write down these promises and have them stuck to the walls, because when we are anxious and when we are stressed, it does really help, even when we can't do the self talk, to look at the promises that are given for those times, specifically when we are anxious and stressed. So that's my testimony and my mental health struggles and what helped me overcome them.
Thank you, Sose, for sharing your struggles with us as well as your victories. I feel like since we have shared our personal stories with each other, that we have developed a spiritual connection. We know each other a lot better than we did before, and I appreciate this experience with you. I have a few questions that I would like to ask you regarding your testimony, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
My, my first question is, when you spoke about the house that was demolished,
Mm-hmm.
you said that it really affected you. Um, Do changes affect you now in your adult life as well? And how do you cope with it?
Okay, so the changes don't actually affect me as much anymore. Because I think I also know that in the end, I want to develop the mindset of I am a citizen or I'm a future citizen of the new earth. And I want to have that attitude that, it says in Philippians 3:20, for our citizenship is in heaven, from which we also eagerly wait for the Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ. So I think I have more coping mechanisms now. I don't cling to things as much, and I'm also prepared, and I have a say in the changes that happen in my life, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Did your self image change when others picked on your appearance and your speech problem? And did you see yourself differently in the mirror?
Okay. So that's a very interesting question, because you would expect someone that was picked on for their appearance or speech to be affected by it. I do remember when I was about 15, when the comment was made about my eyes and my nose. I do remember going to the mirror and looking at myself to see if they were close to reality or not. But I don't really remember them affecting me. I just remember being sad because I wasn't accepted, because I didn't believe that I really had those issues with my appearance. And also, my mum, I'm actually grateful that my mum often reminded me that I do look good, I am smart. Now, we shouldn't rely on these things. That should not be the primary focus, to give us. Courage and to make us confident, but I was not really affected by those things. I don't remember believing those things, because I even remember one time, one lady that I was staying with, I had just woken up and washed my face, and I sat down to eat. She said, "Oh, did you just wash your face?" I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Do you think if you washed your face more often, you would get whiter?" And I just laughed and I didn't pay attention to that, because I was also not at that age where I was concerned about my appearance.
Yeah, I also remember my parents also tried to help me when I was going through the bullying as well, where I was picked on, and they also reassured me, that those things are false that was said to me in school, and it really does help to have family as a support system.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next question. Um, when your sound sensitivity was ignored and confused with intolerance to the individuals, did you feel that your inner world was not seen or understood? And did you ever have a longing for your inner world to be seen through quality time, focused attention, empathy, and understanding?
Yeah, I did definitely feel that longing to be understood and accepted, because it was definitely not intolerance towards the particular person, especially because the first person that I could feel that I can't tolerate the noises from was my mom. So I did like to spend time with her. I did like to go to places with her, but I just couldn't tolerate those noises. So, whatever the reason was, I feel like if that issue was dealt with differently, the result would be different as well. But because it was perceived more as I don't like her or I don't love her, my maybe anger issues and my resentment grew even more.
Yeah, it for me as well. I also had this longing to be understood for who I really was inside and what I was really going through, because people sometimes misjudge your behavior and they think it's this, but it's actually got nothing to do with that. It's something completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Next question. When you moved to Australia and had a lot of time alone and you started feeling resentful because of your childhood memories, did you feel the need to analyze your past to resolve your current symptoms?
Initially, I didn't feel the need for that. I just let my emotions shape my thinking and my actions, obviously, and my belief system. All of a sudden, things that had happened in the past like came back to me, like as if they happened yesterday. And I was just thinking, okay, do I confront them? Do I not? It took a while to put into practice what I learned from the Bible as well as the science. And I just started asking myself, the same way God expects me to eat healthy, would He not expect me to look after my mind the same way? So I tried to look after my mind, at least for that, because I was not given this heart to abuse. And I just learned that forgiveness is good for my health, not just for others, but it benefits me a lot more.
Did you confront the people who hurt you, or did you deal with it without confronting them, just by yourself?
Sometimes I did confront the people if they were more or less close to me. But if they were not close to me, or I would know basically that they are going to get defensive, or if I've tried before having conversations with them and I could see that it results in me looking like the bad guy, I just stopped after a time. It takes a lot of emotional strength for me as well to confront people about something, because you have to think about their reaction. How is it going to be? Are you going to be nice about it? Are you going to try to not offend them in any way? And sometimes I'm just not ready to put in the emotional strength to confront people, especially if there is a risk that I'm going to be the one later that needs to apologize.
Yeah. Okay, next question. How can we deal with racial discrimination from others?
So the person that was rude to me in the taxi and said, "We have rules here," that was definitely uncalled for, and it was something that I didn't deserve, because I didn't feel like I did anything wrong. And she was so clear about why she's treating me that way, because I wasn't from here. And then when I spoke to their manager, she said, "Oh, no, she didn't mean that you're not from the country. She meant not from Queensland." But in Australia, there's no way of telling someone is from a different state. So you can tell that someone that chooses to make a comment like that, that is so offensive, probably has deeper issues. And later I found out that she didn't have that job anymore because she had other issues as well with anger and stuff. It's a lot more different when you don't have a way of proving that, let's say, you didn't get the job because of your accent, or people look at you differently because you're not from the country. Then you just have to kind of take it more as normal, like something is a normal. You are a Christian, you have different values and beliefs, you're going to be treated differently. If your skin color is different, then probably you are going to stand out and there's nothing you can do about it. So my advice is actually to embrace it. If you have a different accent, that is different from the country that you live in, you're probably always going to have that accent. Thoughts went through my mind quite often that if only I could get rid of my accent, I would get more jobs, I would be more accepted, I would be more loved. If only I could have doctorate in my studies, then I would be more respected and everything. So I think we should just be confident regardless, and trust that, again, God is ultimately in control of everything.
Okay, thank you. How can we deal with it when others disapprove of our choices and how we think?
It is a very normal desire to be accepted and acknowledged. We like to be loved, we like to be accepted, and for our opinions to be regarded as special and of value. But we should not seek people's approval to begin with. We are not responsible for what others think of us. We are responsible for our words and our actions. What people think of us is none of our business. I have come to realize that after struggling so much with, feeling that I'm rejected and I want to please people. I would say stick to your principles. Just worry about whether God approves of your actions and your words or not, and the rest will fall into place because my or our eating habits, our lifestyle was not approved, and I actually took it quite hard because support would have been nice. But
Yeah.
then I just got used to it because after a while, also people can see that because of your lifestyle choices, your health is different, your mind functions differently. So, and the ultimate approval is going to be at the second coming when Jesus comes and says, "Well done, good and faithful servant." That's what we all should be looking forward to.
That's a good answer. Yeah, that's very true.
Mm,
What can mothers do who suffer from postnatal depression?
okay. So I can say what I did that has helped me, and I think it would help a lot of other people. Um, I would say talk to like minded people. People that will tell you it's amazing, it's great. They might actually have a different story to tell when you start talking to them about your struggles. I have found that with one friend in particular, where um, before getting pregnant, before having kids, I would talk to her and she would have a different picture of her motherhood. And then when I started talking to her about my struggles, she opened up about her struggles because we get ashamed, we are embarrassed to reveal what we really feel, that we don't want to hold our child, that we want to go for a walk and we don't want to come back home. But it's amazing what you will find out when you start talking to like minded people, and reach out for help. It's either counseling or a psychologist. Counselors I found can be very helpful in my experience, especially. And with my second child, I reached out for help. I got over it a lot quicker, although I had less help. So know that those feelings of guilt and remorse and shame and disconnect are normal. Don't embrace them. Just don't punish you for those things and don't feel ashamed even more. So try to get help for those. Allow yourself to have breaks. Don't worry about the washing that's on the line. Don't worry about all the other things that will happen. If people offer to make meals for you, I would say don't worry about what ingredients they use, whether it's organic, whether it's oil free. Just relax and sleep as much as you can. And I know it's easier said than done, but whenever you have the opportunity, just relax and try to rest because that's what your kids need more for you to be happy.
Yeah.
And I also tried to remember my counselor was a Christian, so he would try to remind me as well what Ellen White said about mothers. There is a lot of quotes that we can have now about mother's role according to her and the revelation that she had received. But she said that being a mother is the most noble job anyone can do. She said, next to God, the mother's power for good is the strongest known on earth. So we should just try to remind ourselves that we are doing a very important job.
Mm. Thank you. Um, you mentioned that there was a time when you used to lie awake at night and worry about things that could happen about your children. Um,
Mhm.
I struggle with the same problem. Um, the recently I lost a pet, and just a few days after losing this pet, I saw a huge python in our garden, exactly on the spot where my cat sits in the day. And so I started to worry about now I'm going to lose my cat as well. And so, what can we do when we have all these anxieties about losing those we love.
Again, a very good thing to remember is that God ultimately is in control. He looks after the sparrows, and they don't have to worry about what they should eat. And the lilies in the field, they don't worry about how they should dress themselves. God looks after all of that. And I try to remind myself that I'm not the one looking after my kids. God is looking after them. He is in control. And again, I try to tell myself, okay, I'll worry about it tomorrow, this and this time. And I kind of allow myself to go to sleep. It does really work.
There was also something that I forgot to add in my testimony when we spoke about the same issue, when we start to catastrophize and worry, has something happened when, say, for example, if you're married and your husband doesn't write back. Um, I wanted to add there, besides bringing my thoughts to the middle ground between the worst thing that could happen and the best thing that could happen, to what most likely is the what is most likely happening. I wanted to
Mm,
still add there that the other thing that I do is I also prepare myself mentally by facing the worst case scenario mentally, so that if it does happen, that I know I do actually have the resources to cope with the worst case scenario. Because a lot of the times we have the anxiety thinking that I will never be able to cope. I will never be able to handle it if this worst case scenario does happen. But we do actually have the resources. We have support. We have God who goes through our struggles with us. So that was
mhm.
also one thing that helped me, to just to remind myself that whatever does happen, I will be okay with whatever happens.
If I can just add as well that Ellen White has also mentioned that worry is blind and cannot discern the future. The Bible refers to fear as a spirit as well. When it says that God did not give us a spirit of fear. So, who then is behind that spirit?
Mm,
So, we should definitely pray that we don't have that spirit.
mm,
It says as well, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Also, and which of you by worrying can add 1 cubit to his stature? If you then are not able to do the least, why are you anxious for the rest? Therefore, I believe, and I have read as well in literature that I was reading before, that certain cancers are linked to certain emotions like fear and anxiety.
mm. Okay. You mentioned when your children got hurt, even if it wasn't your fault, you still felt like you could have done more. What can we do when we give ourselves the blame and hold on to guilt for things that are not our fault?
Okay, so I believe again, what has helped me is being aware of the fact that it is a cognitive distortion, and to replace them with realistic thoughts. Like, what could we have done? Have I done everything I could have done? Well, if I have done everything I could have done, then good, I don't have to worry about that. I can just comfort them and move on. And if I haven't done everything I could have, then next time I should be more careful. And feeling sorry for the kid is fine, but I believe when we show them how sorry we feel, they start feeling sorry for themselves as well, and thinking that something really terrible happened. I know that sometimes when my son, and he hurts himself quite a bit, he falls, and before he can even cry, I can run to him and be like, "Are you okay?" And then all of a sudden he will start crying, like, "Oh yeah." And sometimes he actually rubs on a wrong spot where he didn't even hurt himself. So I know that I just made him anxious. Um, Yeah, and I believe like talk to someone that's going to reassure you. I turn
Mm,
to my husband sometimes and say, I feel really guilty about this. I feel worried about this. What do you say? And then he's usually pretty positive about it, and that is resolved very quickly.
mm. Yeah, it helps to talk to somebody who can rationalize a little bit for us when we can't do it for ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
What can we do about overthinking?
Okay. So in my understanding, overthinking is the lack of trust in God, perhaps lack of faith, and that's how I see it. So trying to control something that is out of our control, because when we overthink, we are not planning, we're not acting, we're just worrying about something. There is a famous quote by Mark Twain. He said, "A lot I've been through a lot in my life, and some of them actually happened." In my case, sometimes I can think, oh, someone looked at me funny. I must have something on my face, or they were yawning while I was talking. They must be bored. Giving the people the benefit of the doubt, avoiding mind reading, because there's a good chance that they are not thinking about anything. Um, Not catastrophizing, that is also obviously a cognitive distortion can happen as a result of overthinking. I would say let's do our part and leave the rest to God, because he will do the rest.
Mm, okay, thank you. How does it affect us when we do not receive validation as a child?
I think it can affect children greatly, because, sometimes they have made a piece of art, they have drawn something or painted something, and they come to you running, they show you what they've done, and um, you take the picture with a smile on your face, and you start telling them how talented they are and how good they are, and you put it on the fridge. And that's what I did the other day, actually. um, I showed my daughter how happy I was with her painting, and I just put it up somewhere so she can see as well, and she was really happy. And on the other hand, I think, yeah, like you said, when we don't receive that validation, it can affect us negatively. I remember when I was a child, I used to, before bed, or go to my dad especially, and I would say good night. My dad would say good night, and I just loved it. One time, I went to my dad and said good night. I think I said it maybe too many times, and he got a bit frustrated because he was working on something. He was writing something. He is a writer, so he was writing something, and he said, "Do you really have to say good night every time?" And so I believe that was the last time I said good night. And years later, just recently, actually, I reminded my dad. I said, "Do you remember that time when I said good night?" And you said, "Do you really have to say good night every time?" And he said, "Wow, that's not a very nice thing to say. Why would I even say something like that?" So obviously he didn't mean it, but it affected me enough that I don't think I said good night after that. And also, just remembering from a very young age, I made a decision that I'm not going to lie, and that is something I'm very strict about, not to lie, even to save my life. And if my parents or someone said you're lying, it would affect me really badly, because that was one of the things I was trying very hard not to do.
Okay. I also experienced quite a lot of problems in my adulthood because of lack of validation, at school and so on. It can really have a strong impact on you later in life if you don't receive it as a child.
Yes.
Mm. Okay, I have one more question here. What can somebody do if they feel suicidal?
Okay. What I've realized as well and learned, that when someone feels suicidal, they don't have much to lose. There's a very good chance that the person, even while they are attempting to do that, they will regret. So there is an open door where counseling and psychologist or Bible studies can come in handy. If I had a friend that was contemplating and was planning, I would actually alert the health services, whichever country you are, whatever help is available. I would actually call and alert the healthcare service that there is a person that is actually planning to do something like that, and then obviously offer them the rest of help.
And there's also helplines available in all the different countries of the world. So it's also helpful to know what that helpline number is for when you feel that way. There, there was one time when I felt like I couldn't carry on anymore, and I actually phoned the hospital, and I said to the person who answered the phone, I'm feeling like I want to do something that that might end my life. And she said to me, "Oh, we're a bit busy now. Can you call back later?" So I was like, "Okay, well, that was a lot of help." So make make sure that you have a helpline that you feel confident will be able to help you when you are in that crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's important because
Absolutely.
when we are in that mindset, it's a very dangerous mindset to be in, and we really need the support, all the support that we can get when we are in that state.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah. And then one other thing you mentioned that sometimes our struggles and our symptoms can come back, and it's the same for me. You know, we have victories. We overcome our anger issues. Maybe for say 3 months or so, I'll be doing really well with my anger outbursts, and I even mentioned in my testimony that I can now control my anger really well. And then just after the testimony, I had this huge anger outburst, and it was because of the stress of giving my testimony, because I was very nervous. So the stress then affected me and caused me to lose control. So relapses are a normal part of the healing process, and you shouldn't feel discouraged when you relapse or take a few steps back. Then you just get up and you carry on again. Don't be discouraged.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Even the Bible says as well, the righteous fall 7 times and they get up again, right? And then, as the quote also mentioned from Ellen White, she says, "We shall fail often in our efforts to copy the divine pattern." She also
Yeah.
says that the character is not determined by one outburst, or,
Yeah.
it's the repetition of those actions that form the character.
Yeah. Thank you very much for sharing your story with us. It's been a really good experience, and I'm sure a lot of people will benefit from your story.
Thank you. It was a privilege. It was a pleasure and a blessing to do the program with you, Tanya. Thank you so much for being a part of it as well.
It's a pleasure. So, say, would you mind closing for us with a word of prayer?
I will. Dear Lord, thank you again for giving us this opportunity to come together, discuss mental health, and to rely on your promises, to lean on your promises given in the Bible, in the spirit of prophecy, and the science as well. Help us and help others as well that are listening to these testimonies to gain courage from them and be able to use in their own lives. We thank you so much. We ask all these in Jesus' precious name. Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.